do it.
Welcome back, guys, to the Cool Lifting Podcast. I'm Theo, and this is my co-host Eric.
hmm
And today we'll be talking about engineering in powerlifting.
Yes.
And I feel like this is a pretty interesting topic because it's been a huge mindset shift in the way people perceive programming, technique, whatever, in coaching in the last, 4 or 5 years, I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'd
and
say like the last 4 to 5 years is when
yeah,
people started thinking more.
yeah, yeah, true. And back in the day, what we felt like going way back when is people have been more dogmatic with the way that they approach their training. It was more of like a trust the process type thing. Or, if something wasn't working, the coach would often say something like, hey, like maybe you're doing something wrong. And they wouldn't really make any sort of adjustments. They had their own system. They get married to these
Yeah,
ideas.
very locked in on their own system. And it's good to have a system, but when things start to not work, that's when things need to be changed or adapted to something else, whatever it is.
Right? Um, and now I would say all of the best coaches have their own problem solving model. And we use a lot of the same tools to solve problems. Um, and the way that we view things is like everything can be utilized. It's just more so what do we want to use? What are the pros and cons? Um,
What tool in the toolbox?
yes, the tools in the toolbox. So we both are in, I guess, more engineering esque roles in our jobs, and we had those type of majors in college. So
Yeah, there's a good
yeah,
amount of powerlifters who are just some sort of engineering or some sort of STEM
yeah,
major as well. And they might feel like what they're learning has no application to powerlifting, but a lot of it does.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think a lot of people would be surprised. Like a lot of the strongest powerlifters are like pretty much nerds.
Yeah.
And like there's a ton of reasons for that. Like powerlifting is very concrete.
hmm
So like, you see the number go up, it's just really easy to understand like, oh, you're making good
Yeah.
progress. It's fun to see the number go up.
hmm
Unlike something like bodybuilding where, it might become a little bit more subjective as the
Yeah.
years go on.
Powerlifting is very objective. And I feel like as an athlete gets stronger, as an athlete gets more advanced, there's also some level to it where it's like, hey, if my numbers aren't going up, I'm not really having any more fun. And, I understand, or just the athlete understands, there are periods of time where things might be a struggle for whatever reason, but we want this number to go up. And this number sort of just tells you, like, hey, we're making progress. If the number goes up, we're making progress. If the number doesn't go up, then there's something going on.
Yeah, right. And there's different metrics you can use to see if you're making good progress. Like obviously the number one goal is to get your one rep max higher.
Yes.
But even if you make like technique gains or something,
Yeah.
like those are very objective because there's like an objective way you can like just analyze someone's efficiency in a lift. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
wins that can happen in powerlifting, and I think that's
Yeah.
what makes it really cool. Um, so
Let's get into it.
yeah, so what is engineering, Eric?
Engineering.
Are we fake engineers?
The official definition is the application of science and math to solve problems. But how exactly does science and math apply to powerlifting problem solving?
Yeah, so um, I guess we'll start with like the science part. I think this one's a lot easier to wrap your head around because like there's a major called exercise science. So like there's a science of the way to see how the human body works.
Yeah, even like biomechanics,
Yeah,
there's science to that.
right. And then in my own head, there's a science that is required for like programming just to get someone stronger, their technique, but also like there's a human element to it where like you might have to learn psychology or whatever to help get an athlete to where they want to be. There's a lot of personalities in powerlifting.
A lot of personalities.
Yeah. So like you almost have to like social engineer and like figure out how to approach criticism or whatever to certain athletes.
Even if you're an athlete and you have a hard time taking criticism, or you have a hard time going about powerlifting when training starts to get rough, that psychology aspect applies to you, because if you have a really hard time the second training starts to get rough, what happens when training starts to get rough for like 5 months?
Yeah, right.
There might need to be something that is worked on.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, like for me in particular, I'm like the type of athlete where if my coach tells me like, hey, you got to work harder, you got to lock in, like I'm not going to take offense to that. Like I'll be like, yeah, I got to work harder. But I do know a lot of athletes who are maybe a little more sensitive.
I'm a little more sensitive. I'll take like a little bit of offense, but then I'll do it. And I'll do it, so it's okay.
So when David tells you your form is up, you're not. You're not.
Crap, I need to get better.
Nah. And then maths. This one is probably a little bit more on the coaching end because it can be used really concretely, because you can actually figure out a lot of trends. Like a lot of coaches will use like percentages in their programming, and they'll collect data that way, where like some people might mix some RPE in. There's a ton of different ways, but
tonnage.
Yeah, right. Like total tonnage.
That one's not as brought up, I feel like, in the current landscape of things.
Yeah.
But it is still math.
Right, or even like velocity based. Yeah. But...
yeah, those two. Those are a little less common, but they're still a thing.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give like a small example for me. Like I have a regular, 4-week training cycle, and usually we'll have a heavy number by the end of the block. We have like a range that we want to go in, and for my week 3, the week leading it into that, I'll take 90% of that number, just so we can always have like that concrete data. And some people might think that's excessive, but like it just is something that me and my coach utilize. So I think that kind of leads into the scientific method. And what is the scientific method, Eric?
The scientific method, we can just read it off, because I might mess it up.
Yeah, right. So
I say exactly off the top of my head. But there is a list of steps, right? Observation / question, and then research, and then hypothesis, then you experiment, collect data, analysis, and conclusion. And what each of these are, with the question, just ask yourself the question for whatever topic it is, whether it's the programming or whether it's the technique, like, hey, maybe how do I make this program better? How do I make my technique better? And then with the research, find out a little bit more about the topic, right? There's a lot of resources out there. This podcast is one of those resources.
Good and bad resources.
There's a lot of bad resources out there. There's so much, or maybe it's just like neutral, where it just doesn't apply to you at all, right? So you really have to be able to think for yourself. And then you make a hypothesis, sort of predict the outcome to the problem, you predict what you think will happen with this change. And then you experiment. You can add in this topic or this.
Yeah. Well, we'll be utilizing some like thing you're trying to implement in your training.
Yeah, that's a better way to word it. And then you collect the data. You kind of just see if the number goes up or the number goes down.
Yeah, right. And then obviously you're going to analyze it, and then if you conclude that it's going to be helpful, then you'll probably keep doing it. But if you don't like it, you'll just take it away.
Yeah, it kind of is as simple as that with the conclusion in powerlifting, at least.
Right. But even if it doesn't work, it's good to have the information in there. And that's something that's really important to understand too.
No bad days, just data,
exactly.
As some might say.
Yeah. And as you said, like this can be used for the programming and the technique. So like for example, like when you first start lifting, like like the most common thing is like people want to go from conventional to sumo, and like they'll research
Oh,
this. Yeah,
YouTube, how to sumo
yeah, because
deadlift.
in their own mind they're like, oh, sumo's always better than conventional, and then they'll go down that rabbit hole and they'll try to start sumo deadlifting, and um, once they start experimenting with it, they'll realize that they probably can't do it, and then they'll conclude that sumo sucks. But if you're good at it, it's cheating. So
That's a pretty solid way to go down the scientific method.
yeah, exactly. But in all seriousness, like someone might just find a video on YouTube,
Yeah,
and
but that is their way of research.
yeah, right,
That is an appropriate way of research.
yeah, and
But they might just pick like whatever the most popular video is.
yeah,
And then maybe the most popular video isn't as powerlifting-esque as another video with less views.
yeah, right. And the one thing is like you can repeat the scientific method, and that's really important to know because like they might try that YouTube video, it might not work out for them, but they understand like, well, they might come across some piece of like media that is better at explaining more of like a powerlifting type of sumo deadlift, and they'll repeat the process and make those micro adjustments.
Yes.
So I guess that is more on the technique side. I think it's very more concrete because everyone's recording their workouts now.
Yeah.
So like it's very easy to understand. Like you just gotta record it, see if it's safe, it's efficient, and it's working out well for you.
Yeah, you'll kind of just know if it's feeling good versus if it's feeling bad.
Yeah, and where I think it might be a little bit confusing for a lot of people is on the programming side. This is where a lot of people struggle with. Because like we said, there's a lot of good things out there. There's also a lot of things that might not be relevant to where you are as a powerlifter. And then there's a lot of bad information.
But one thing real quick with the technique
Yeah.
is it's possible to come to the conclusion that this technique you're trying out doesn't feel good. Or maybe it feels good until you get to like a certain weight cap. And the scientific method doesn't mean as much if you're just going to ignore the fact that it doesn't feel good, and if you're just going to ignore the fact that, hey, whenever I hit this weight cap, I keep dying out. And if there's no change, if there's no redoing the scientific method, finding a better solution, it doesn't mean that much.
Right. The copium, as someone would say.
Yes.
But yeah, I agree.
That ties in with the programming aspect as well.
Yeah, and I think too, something that a lot of people struggle with is like not understanding that there's trade-offs to certain technique changes that you'll do.
Pros and cons.
Yeah, and like when you use the scientific method, like you need to kind of make a mental note or like actually write it down of, what is going to do you better in the long run. For example, like if you're in a more stacked position, you're in a more efficient position with the sumo deadlift and you're wedging in properly, it's just going to be harder off the floor. And it's going to make the lockout a lot easier though. It's going to make things more consistent. But I think a lot of people who start this process get married to the idea that like it's going to be perfect the entire way through. But like you just have to understand that there's always going to be pros and cons.
Yeah, things don't need to be perfect. They just need to be like good enough to get this number moving.
Right. So
now with programming.
Yeah, programming. Like I said, this is going to be a lot more, I would say, like confusing to the average lifter of like what to do and what not to do. So I guess we should start with like sometimes you just need to make an educated guess, and sometimes it's just not going to pan out. So you use the scientific method again, and if you have a coach, I think the great coaches, they'll know the questions to ask you when they're applying the scientific method, and they'll find the answer that they're looking for.
Yeah. When the coach asks you questions, it's more so to get a little more data to see what direction that program or that this technique or that this overall training needs to now go in. And it's kind of like a doctor, right? A doctor asks you a bunch of questions when you walk in. Maybe you're sick, or maybe something hurts, and they just ask you a bunch of questions, and then they diagnose you. But they can't really diagnose you right off the bat. They need to ask you these questions first to know what you're feeling and to know what's going on. But then you also need to answer these questions truthfully. And if there's anything else going on, like any other crazy outside variable, you also need to mention that as well. Like maybe you mentioned to the doctor, you're feeling sick, and then you're like, hey, I also didn't get any sleep for the past 7 days. It's like, okay, that might play a role. And that ties into powerlifting too.
Yeah. And to kind of build up on top of that too, like that's why it's also important that we try to keep as many things consistent in your programming. Like even some things as simple as changing certain accessories, that can play a big role. If it's something like you're switching out flat dumbbell chest press for machine chest press, like
It happened with you, right?
yes, yeah, like you might notice something where it's just not giving you enough stimulus to prime your bench sessions.
And like this stuff was taught about in middle school science, just variables. And I had no idea what that meant when I was in middle school. I was like, variables? Why the heck does this word start with a V? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's like, I was just confused about that. But now, as I understand powerlifting a little more, all that stuff makes a little more sense.
You sure you're an engineer? No, I'm just kidding.
Now I know what a variable is.
Yeah,
It only took me 25 years.
But that's also a good point because like with other things applied in science, there's like scientific principles, right? Like Newton's law, like third law, right? But also in programming, there's principles that we use to apply changes in a program. So like, you might change someone's volume, adding more sets, or like how heavy they're going to go. And your coach is going to use these principles to determine the change that they want to do. And even though it might be like an educated guess, it can be concretely supported by these principles. And,
Exactly.
Like that's how you know if your coach is doing a good job because, like they're just not going to throw something random at you because something's going wrong. They're going to follow this thought process, the scientific method.
And even if you're self-coached, which is a little more rare to see these days, it's good, like it's fine to be self-coached, but think a little bit about your program when something isn't moving. Like don't just throw in random stuff. I feel like that's a little more common with the self-coached people, but just take a step back and think, hey, this was working, this isn't working anymore. What steps could I possibly make going forward?
Yeah. And I think at a baseline with the scientific method, with these variables that you talked about, it's really important that you make all these things consistent first before you start applying more changes. So like if your sleep isn't good, try to at least make it consistent. If you only get like 7 hours a week, just at least
a week.
yeah, or no, 7 hours a day. That'd be crazy. Unless you're Abe. But
That is all over.
Yeah.
He's a hard worker.
But yeah, like sleep, nutrition,
Yeah.
those are like most important ones.
You can better see these changes made if the other variables are consistent. And one variable at a time.
Right.
Which I learned in middle school math.
Nah. All right. I know you learned in 5th grade what variables were. So in 2025, are you able to understand what data is and what that means in powerlifting? Or are you still trying to wrap your head around that one?
I understand that one a lot better now. Funny enough, it took me working an engineering job to really understand a little bit more about the data. And it's not even that complicated. It's like the saying, no bad days, just data. I had no idea what that meant. Like I would see that posted everywhere during college, and I would just think,
You'd be like,
no one asked me any questions about that.
It's like, I'm failing my lifts. Like, what do you mean? This is terrible.
But I wasn't coaching anyone at the time, so it's okay that I didn't know what that meant. But what good data is it's pretty much just things that worked. And maybe you had a block where your squat went really well, and that is good data. It's like, hey, I know when I run this rep scheme, and when I squat on these days, and when I do these accessories, I hit a big PR. So maybe we should stay close to this good data because it's working. And then bad data is things that maybe didn't work. Maybe you had a block with your bench and it regressed like 20 pounds. And now it's like, okay, well, I did this stuff in this block and my bench regressed. And it's, you can, the no bad days, just data, it ties in where you can learn from this bad block and you can learn from this bad data. And it's like, okay, well, it wasn't really a waste of time, and it's not the worst thing in the world because I at least know, hey, this isn't good for me. Maybe I need to do something else in order to get this progress going again.
So I'm sure this has happened to you before, but what do you do or say when you have an athlete, like you have the data that they're making progress on a lift, right? Like maybe they even hit a PR, but they're like, a little bit unhappy about their progress still, or like, hey, like it didn't feel good, like, and then they start wanting to make changes. Like, how do you approach that?
The most important thing to understand as a powerlifter is progress, and progress is not ever guaranteed. And it's very possible to powerlift for the next year and make no progress if you either don't dial in or if you have a really bad program or whatever it is. Progress is progress. And if you have progress going, it's very important to keep it. It's very important to not stray too far away from what's working. So for that, if you, let's say they hit a 10-pound PR, but they wanted like a 25-pound PR.
Right.
10-pound PR is still pretty good. You can tell yourself, you tell the athlete, whatever, like, hey, if I make a change, it very well might happen to where I make 0 pounds of progress next block, but I also might make 25 pounds. Well, that's kind of a lot, but it's like, maybe if I make this change, I'll make more progress. But you have to also understand, if you make this change, it's also likely you make no progress because we're straying away from what worked. We're straying away from this progress we have currently.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to bring this up because this is probably the most common thing I see in the gym where it's like someone will hit the 10-pound PR, but they're like, well, I could have a little bit more, like maybe I want to add another day in. But, like adding another day, it comes with a lot of risk. And for me, like I'll always lay out the pros and cons of like, hey, we could do this. We add that third squat day and your squat might go up. But your deadlift might start taking a hit because there's some fatigue coming in, or it just might not work. And adding a third squat day adds in more variables, so the problem solving becomes a lot more difficult. And if they're like, yeah, let's do it, like we can at least have that old piece of good data and go back to that, like you're saying.
Yeah, you can always take out that day.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Or maybe you have 3 days of squatting already, and you're like, hey, I think 2 will be better. And you just take out the 3rd day, and then you try 2. And if it goes south really fast, you can just add that 3rd day back in.
Right.
You can undo that change. You can control Z it.
Right. Yeah, and with some data too, like you might already have this piece of good data for programming, but going back to the variables, sometimes like just locking in on those variables will make the good data even better data.
Yes.
And that's where I would honestly recommend everyone start with. Like if they're making progress, they're unhappy, start there first.
Yeah, especially a lot of powerlifters are just students.
Yeah.
And if you talk to a student for more than 5 minutes, you can find out pretty quickly. There's some holes somewhere that you can improve upon. And like every student says they get their sleep, and then then you just talk about studying, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I was up all night last night studying. I didn't get any sleep." It's like, I thought you just told me you were on top of everything. Right. That happens all the time.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. That and like the eating.
Yeah, or they're like, "Oh, I hit my protein," and I'm like, "Okay, show me how much protein you ate yesterday." They're like, "Oh, I can't. I don't track." Okay.
Yeah. So what if someone doesn't do anything? So like you said, like they don't track. Yeah.
Common. That's like with someone maybe just getting into powerlifting.
Yeah.
Maybe they're even somewhat strong, and they're getting into powerlifting, and they're just kind of like, yeah, I just go to the gym, I do whatever. I'm not on program. I don't have anything. With that person, and even if they're, let's say you're an athlete going to a coach, and you're kind of in that situation, and you have absolutely nothing, you can still somewhat string together what you've been doing. So maybe on average, you've been squatting twice a week, and on average, you've been benching twice a week. Or maybe it's normally you have consistent days, but nothing's just on paper. You can try your best to put something on paper so you can at least look at it and be like, okay, that's pretty close to what I've been doing. And now you have at least something to go off of versus nothing.
Yeah, I agree because like I think there's a lot of people who just go to the gym, don't follow a program. Like they might just be bodybuilding too. So like all they know is like they're pushing
General fitness.
Yeah.
As well.
But you know like they'll at least know if they're benching, right?
Yeah.
And like what didn't work, what they didn't like, and that is a good starting point usually. But even so, like once you get those people on any sort of program, like they'll probably notice huge strength gains.
And even if the program doesn't work, you can just do something different and see what's up. But this is common with like high school student athletes.
Yeah.
So I was talking to a few of those who were graduating high school, and they had a football background, and they were saying they don't have their program on paper, but their coach has some sort of structure, some sort of program that they do, and they basically told me like, hey, I squat this day, I benched it this day, I power clean this day, and then I repeat and I rest. And it's even with that, it's like, okay, you squat twice a week, you bench twice a week, you don't deadlift, so that's something. I know something now about this program that you do.
Yeah. So to kind of touch up on what you brought up too, like if you're a complete beginner, I think you don't necessarily have the money for a coach. At least just hopping on a program.
I think hopping on an online program is way better than having no program. Or even if you want to do your own program, having it written on paper and then not, like having it written on paper and then not changing it every other day. Just because you're like, oh, I think maybe this could be better. Like sticking to what you plan on running and committing to it.
Yeah, and what a lot of athletes who approach me, probably you too, is like they might have already had a coach, or they've at least followed a program and it's not working anymore, and they'll come to you with this data.
Yeah.
And that way you as a coach can look back on this data and see what's working, what's not working. And that would be a really good starting point for like a coach to go on.
Yeah, just looking back on the program, and then maybe they'll say, like, hey, this past block was terrible, but then they'll say, oh, but right before my meet prep, it was going really well. And we can see if that differed or if it's the same and see what's up with that. And even with you as an athlete, I'm sure there are, like let's say you run 5 blocks with your coach. And this block, maybe for some reason it's starting to go south a bit. You can just look back on your old blocks and think, okay, when was my training really going well? Let me look back and see if my days are different, see if my rep scheme is way different. Or maybe I look at my old videos from when my squat was going really well, and maybe my technique is way better in that versus how it is now. Looking back on the data can really show you a lot.
Yeah, and this is something even more advanced athletes experience. Like for example, with me, like one block went really, really well, and then we repeated the same thing for the next block, but it didn't go quite as well as I thought it would. But then when I looked back, what I realized was the weekly jumps that I was taking were a lot
Yeah.
larger. So that's when we learned like it just wasn't. It wasn't really the program. It was more so like the attempt selection, I
Yeah.
guess.
And that's a little like you have to look deeper in the program for
Yeah.
something like that because that might not be as apparent
Right.
as doing maybe a 3x3 on one day and now you're doing a 4x8.
Yeah. Right. Right. So I guess what's your take on changing sets, reps, whatever from block to block? Are you someone who typically does that, or are you someone who, on a secondary day, let's say you give someone like a 3x8 on bench, are you one to keep it the same?
I like to keep the secondary day the same rather than the primary because the secondary controls how the primary feels and how it moves. And if we have something on the secondary, that's really good. I want to just keep that the same, and then we can have this primary day. Maybe we change up the reps a little bit, just alternate from sets of 4 to sets of 5. Basically the same thing. That's not really a crazy change. But I like keeping the secondary day the same.
Okay, yeah. I got you. Yeah, so that's also something I just want to bring up because that is pretty much the scientific method applied to someone's program. And just knowing that little bit of a fact that you only really start by changing the secondary day first would be a good way to like look at someone's program. That's probably a little bit more advanced, I would say, but it can go pretty deep because you can go from as basic as like technical change and seeing if like pointing out your toes a little bit more on deadlift is going to help to all the way to changing like primary day versus secondary day or something like that.
Sometimes people have pause deadlifts on their secondary day. That's a common thing. And then they stop doing the pause deadlift and they replace it with just regular comp deadlift. And all of a sudden their primary day starts to tank because they don't have that pause to keep them in check. And then that's the thing where you can look back at the data and it's like, what was I doing differently? And I was like, oh, I was pausing my secondary. Now I'm not pausing my secondary. And that's also super easy to add back in.
Right. Okay. So did you want to go over this? Sorry, I don't really know how to.
Okay, so logical thinking in computer science is kind of like if this situation happens, then we do that. And this applies to powerlifting as well, just like the pause deadlift example. So let's take out the pause deadlift, and then if this deadlift tanks, then we add in this pause deadlift again. And a lot of this if this, then that applies to powerlifting. You can get pretty creative with it.
Yeah, and this goes back to the toolbox thing we talked about, like having a different tools for different situations. Because, like we said, there's going to be logical thinking for first the principles that you have, but then identifying the problem. If this problem occurs, I probably need these type of tools for this problem. And you can get this information online or just through experience. There's going to be so much logical thinking used because we can go as I guess niche from the person's age, gender, their weight class, their leverages, that will also narrow down the tools that you'll probably want to use.
Maybe someone's a little more leveraged for deadlifts, and it's something like if this person is leveraged for deadlifts, then we can give them high reps, and they'll be able to tolerate it because they have long arms, and now they're unstoppable with their long arms on deadlift. Right?
Yeah, and this logical thinking I see can be applied in both good and bad ways for some coaches too, because you might have a lifter who has longer arms and they've probably heard online that adding another bench day is going to help their bench. But it might not be the best solution if they're already benching 3 times a week, and adding that 4th day in just might take them to Snap City. But again, this comes down to identifying the problem first.
Yeah.
And going towards a solution that is going to make sense. Mm-hmm. So, is there anything that you would recommend people to do to help identify the problem they have? Like maybe make some mental notes if maybe you could help them understand if they're feeling more fatigued or maybe a little bit more detrained.
Yeah. So with this, that's a really common one that gets that people just ask questions about. They say something like they're too fatigued because things feel heavy, things feel foreign, things feel weird. But really, they might be detrained because the secondary day isn't heavy enough, or maybe it's too heavy, or maybe it's too far away to really keep them in check. So they might attack this problem by trying to be less fatigued. Maybe they try and do less work or try and push their accessories less or something like that. But that's not even the real problem at hand. The real problem at hand is the lifter is detrained. But they're addressing this other problem, and that's going to totally throw things off even more because they're not even going down the right direction. So if we can't get this first, if we can't identify this problem correctly, like we're screwed. So we need to be able to identify this problem correctly. And how we do that is just with research, or it's with asking questions, like having the coach ask you the right questions. And if you feel like your coach isn't asking you enough questions, you can give them the feedback that you feel like is needed. You just tell them how it is, right? Tell them like, hey, this bar feels really heavy on my back. I think I'm fatigued. And then it's up to the coach to make the final decision.
Yeah, and for me, this can already be broken down with the system that I have for my athletes. Like using the principles that I have and the scientific method. I'll usually have someone start with more spaced out days, like have the exposure further apart for, squat or deadlift. The volume might start lower, intensity might start lower, based on the data that they give me. Yeah. And if I know them like as a friend, I could also just see how they're lifting too. But starting something like this makes the scientific method and applying it a lot easier than other types of programming, because I would say most coaches now are more in like a DUP type of programming where they have a primary day and a secondary day. So, like once we can identify the problem, it is usually easier to assume that it's probably within this range of problems rather than like, oh, you're probably overly fatigued or whatever. Because it's less likely to happen if you start with something that's further away from the problem that is probably the worst one you want to have.
There's better scientific principles, like you were saying earlier, that are out now versus maybe when both of us first started powerlifting like 7-ish years ago. And a lot of people have, like maybe they'll have their secondary squat one day and then they'll have a 2-day rest and then they'll have their primary squat the next day. So they have a 2-day gap in between. And we kind of know like that just works well for a lot of people because there's been 7 years of powerlifting going by, a lot of people trying new stuff. And when I first started powerlifting, I want to say I squatted on, I think I had my primary squat on Saturday and my secondary squat on Monday. So I had this big gap from Monday to Saturday going on, and my Saturday felt so heavy. But what I thought the problem was at the time was that my deadlift in the middle of the week, maybe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, I thought my deadlift was cooking my squat. And we changed the split, me and my coach, but we did change with the split, so the deadlift wouldn't affect the squat. But what also came with the split change was I'm no longer resting like 4 days in between my secondary squat and my primary squat. So it coincidentally just ended up getting fixed. But that, looking back on it, that wasn't really the proper problem identification.
Right. Yeah. And I think we've all, I guess the older
We've all-
generation,
yeah,
like
we've all been there.
identifying the problem. Like I'm sure me and you, but both had like one of those like nightmare scenarios with a client where like you tried everything and it's not working.
And then something else comes up.
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
wait a minute. Like, that thing's been happening this whole time?
Yeah.
Maybe they're doing some weird warm up. And then that's throwing things off.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah. But also, I think something also that's really important to know is there's a lot of good coaches who have the scientific method, but it could be really helpful to just get like a fresh set of eyes to look at what's happening to you, and maybe their approach to the same problem is a little bit different and it works out for you.
Yeah, of course, be careful who you take advice from. Maybe don't take advice from someone who just started lifting 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But it's good to get different inputs. And really, as long as the problem gets solved, that's what we want. And maybe, even if maybe someone else gives you some advice, and then you go to your coach with that advice, and the problem now gets fixed. It doesn't really matter if the coach fixed it or someone else fixed it. What matters is it got fixed. That's what we want. We want this problem to get fixed.
Yeah, right. And I know you mentioned before, like you work in like a STEM type of job.
Yeah.
So I guess like what exactly do you do, and do you feel like it kind of ties in with the way that you think of programming as well? And
Yeah, so my day job is software development. I write code in Python and SQL, for those who know what that is. But with writing code, when I was in school, like I'd work on a project, and I'd just write the code, and write the code. I'd add like hundreds of lines to this code, trying to get this answer. And then I wouldn't run it at all. I'd just keep writing the code. And then, eventually, after a couple hours of writing code, I'd press the run button, and then I'd get an error. And I would have no idea where this error came from, because I just added like 10 different things to this code. And that can happen in powerlifting as well, if you have your powerlifting program, and you just make 10 different changes immediately. Maybe you move your bench days around, go from high reps to low reps, do one more thing, and then you do that for all 3 lifts. That adds up to 9 changes. And now this program looks totally different than the program we had before. And it's hard to know what got fixed and what maybe is causing things to act up now, because we just made so many changes. And this is the same thing with the code. I was just typing away, and now I'm trying to fix this code, and I'm just like, what the heck is happening? Like, I wrote all this code, and I have no idea where I need to edit, because I was just so locked in and just making a million different adjustments. But now I have an adjustment I need to fix, and I don't know where to even start. And that ties in with powerlifting as well.
yeah, right. Because I would say like that's the biggest thing is like once someone feels like they're struggling with something, they're just like want to just try everything.
Yeah.
So I think something else that's really important though is like if you kind of set yourself a baseline and just do one change over time, maybe one change per block, the starting point might look very different from where you end because, like at the end of the day, you just want to get stronger. But like you're not going to assume all of these things and try to get there from like block 1 to block 2. Like you do need to take the time. It might take you 3 blocks. It might take you a year, but like at least you're, learning something throughout the entire way. And yeah, so.
And one more thing too with the software development is it's important to have old revisions of your code, because this program software development program does get updated and maybe a lot of new bugs come in with the new revision, and you're just like, wow, all these bugs and all these glitches are happening. Let me just go back to the old revision so I don't have to deal with that. So we have this old revision saved, and we have this old program saved. We have the previous block saved on the Google Sheets or the Excel. It's important to just, if things are acting up, if you're getting all these bugs in your powerlifting program that are happening, you can look back on your old program and see the difference, which we talked about earlier.
Right, exactly. So I would say I have like a similar experience. I work in IT, so I would say like I've done it all. Like I started as help desk, became like a systems administrator, and then eventually, excuse me, a cybersecurity engineer. But it's the same thing. A lot of the problem solving and the scientific method is a lot of pattern recognition. And in IT, like I'm sure you guys have heard like the memes of my printer's broken, like the IT guy has to fix it. Like it's typically the same problems, like you have to turn it off and then turn it back on or something. But like it can be as advanced as trying to set up a whole network for someone's office. So it's the same thing. Like in networking, you might make like a network diagram to map out everything before you even start, hooking up wires or whatever. And basically, that's the way that I set up someone's program too. Is like I'll use the principles that I have, and I'll set up their program initially, and then if things start to go wrong, then I start making those small adjustments or whatever, doing things one by one, figuring out and determining what the issue is.
And with the pattern recognition, a lot of the times as a coach, people have the same problems act up, and they'll just get the same answers because it's the same problem. And then there's things that are a little more complicated, but even those problems, maybe there's other people who have the same problem as well, and you can give them the same thing.
Yeah, right. And to go on top of that with some like IT examples, like there's some companies that might use Cisco products, and they have their own, like way that they're going to problem solve their own devices. They have their own, interface, whatever, like terminal, and then like Palo Alto or whatever, they might use their own. But at its core, both of them would use the same sort of problem solving principles. Just more of those tools that you're going to use to actually fix the problem are going to be different, like you were saying. So there's a lot of things, I guess, in the tech space or engineering space that are adages that are used that also relate into powerlifting. So, for example, like garbage in, garbage out. Like, how would you say that ties into powerlifting?
I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
Because, like, let's say you have a calculator and you enter the letter A in the calculator. You type A plus A, just a regular calculator. It's not going to give you an answer because that's not how calculators work. They want the numbers to be inputted. So, with powerlifting, if you have your program on paper and then you just keep going off program, you're going to get a very different output than what might be expected if you stay on program. Or even with food, if you eat garbage and put garbage in your body, then it will reflect on your body, and you'll see it with your muscle growth, or maybe you're not as lean, maybe you're a bit more hefty, right? So, or maybe if you get garbage sleep, then you get garbage progress. So it all ties in that aspect. I like that saying.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorites is just if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because, like I said, if you're making progress and you might want to make more progress and you start adding changes, it's probably not a good idea to do that because you're going to mess with something that's already working.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's number one. Even with my coding as a software developer, and when I'm talking to my boss, my manager, whatever you want to call him, like we'll talk about it, and I'll just be like, hey, this code works, and this works. Like, this is really good because it works. And maybe, it takes a tiny bit longer than expected, or maybe it doesn't look as pretty, or maybe we're using different, I don't know the word, like, different styles of programming in the actual program itself. But what matters is it works. And the boss is happy if it works. You as an athlete are happy if there's progress coming, which means the program is working. It works. That is so important. We want it to work.
Yeah. And, this also just ties into managing expectations because, there's a lot of athletes who might see like Agatha squatting 4 times a week and then Austin doing some insane amount of SBD days. And they're like...
Yeah. Do you know why he's doing that? I listened to the podcast.
I did not.
It's because he's going to be a dad.
Oh.
Yeah. So they're just trying to spread it out throughout the week. So almost everyone listening to this is not having a kid right now. that's something very important to know.
But he's the strongest person in the world.
He became this.
So yeah, like exactly what you said though, like it's very circumstantial, and just because you see someone doing something doesn't mean you should just start applying it because
like the Austin thing is so circumstantial. And I had a couple athletes ask me about that. And I didn't listen to the podcast, and I just said, oh, well, I'm just assuming, when you get to that level, things are very different, which is true.
Yeah.
That does tie in to his situation as well. But it's also like, hey, he's going to be a father, and, if you want more details, listen to that podcast. You can find it somewhere. But that's a very situational thing where it's like, I don't even know anyone at my gym right now who's in the process of becoming a father.
Yeah, I don't...
Like, there's a few who have kids, but I don't know anyone who has a partner who's pregnant.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so it's like, that doesn't apply to so many people.
Yeah, right. So, I know there's more adages. Is there any other ones you want to mention?
A couple more. I was just looking them up. But fail fast, fail cheap is one as well. Like, if some technique just isn't working, and you're failing at lockout forever, we just need to change it. Or if the athlete is adamant about having something in their program, but training isn't going well, it's okay, maybe we just need to take this out.
Yeah, I actually see this problem a lot when people try to like maximize efficiency, because like they might think that full max with grip on bench is like the best thing ever.
Yeah, they like their short ROM. Even with me, my ROM is longer than it was 2 years ago, and I'm stronger on bench than I was 2 years ago. Because I just had all these issues that popped up, and I was like, man, this isn't anymore. This is too much. Like, too much going on.
And it goes exactly what you're saying, because like it might work really well with that low end, but then when it gets to that high end, that like RP9, they can't sustain that technique.
Yeah, you'll see it when things get to 100% or whatever it is. Like there's a percent where this stuff acts up.
Yeah, and this one that you wrote down, this is a good one. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Because it's just powerlifting is very simple. Like a lot of our programs probably look very similar. So like it's very rare that you meet someone who's like a really special case. They're probably more of an advanced athlete. Like they've been training for over 10 years, where they might have that fourth squat day. They might be deadlifting 3 times a week. So don't like immediately think you need to start doing these like advanced concepts. Like it's probably something very simple. And you're most likely not making progress because your variables are just not stabilized.
I've had multiple athletes come to me and tell me like something along the lines of, hey, I'm a very unique case and I need this happening and I need this happening. Then I ask them how the training's going and they say it's not going well. I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, if you need this stuff and you're doing this stuff, but your training isn't going well, do you even need it? And then I give them something super basic and super simple, and it works way better than their overly complicated thing.
Yeah. And I think if you start noticing this thing where you just have to start making all of these changes and your number isn't going up, it might point to some other signs too. Like it might be time to move up in a weight class, or like
that's also a very simple
yeah,
answer.
And like
That determines a lot.
yeah, like because if you've been in whatever weight class for like X amount of years, you might be making progress in the gym, but if you can't translate it over to the platform, like it's time to hang it up in that weight class.
Yeah.
So
this one's a little bit of a coding one. It's a feature, not a bug. But sometimes you might try something out accidentally. Maybe you read the program wrong. Maybe you have to change your days due to vacation or due to you getting sick. But then all of a sudden you see that when you change your days due to you getting sick, this program you feel so strong and something is really clicking. And maybe we should pay attention to that. Maybe we should look at that and think, okay, well, this guy was just sick for 3 days. They were really sick, but now they moved their days around, and this day is showing up amazingly, even though they were sick and their variables weren't good just because they were sick. Hey, maybe we should take a look at that. It's a feature, not a bug. And then in programming, it's like maybe a bug will happen, but then it kind of works out to where it makes the program just look prettier for the user. It's like, oh, that was a part of it, and then you just play it off.
Yeah,
it's like, oh,
exactly.
Yeah, I meant to do that.
Got to keep the grift up.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like I think this is actually how a lot of new tools are actually also found. Because I know for me, I had a client who like they were unhappy with their single that they did on their tertiary day, so they just repeated it without saying anything. But then like their primary day ended up showing up better, and I was like, wait a minute, like maybe the repeat single is the way.
Those are really good times, even for you as an athlete, to really pay attention to that, because that stuff doesn't pop up often. Like if you're, I'm sure if you're listening to this, be a good athlete, and if you are a good athlete, right, you're not really going off program, you're not really doing dumb stuff. This stuff kind of just happens. Maybe when you're sick, that's a good example, because everyone gets sick every now and then they have to adjust the best they can. Or maybe there's a hurricane in Houston, and the gym is closed one day, and you got to do the workout the next day. But then all of a sudden things are going really well. That stuff doesn't happen often, so it's really important to pay attention when that stuff happens.
Yeah, exactly. So there's another term called over-engineering that we have written down.
We pretty much talked about that.
Yeah. Right. And basically,
You don't need to over-engineer things. You just need to keep things simple. What's the saying again?
Simple, stupid. Oh, simple, specific, scientific.
Simple,
and
specific,
then one of these.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how it is. That's how powerlifting is.
Yeah.
And if you can keep it like that, you can get far.
Exactly. So I think that ends our podcast. Thanks for watching. And if you want to follow us, you can find us on Instagram.
You can find us somehow.
Exactly.
If you have any questions, just DM us and we'll respond.
All right.
Awesome. Oof. There we go.